Hi there, my name is Yasser. I'm a PhD in Sustainable Building Engineering. I'm a senior lecturer in architecture, and you're watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi there, and thanks for tuning in to A Student's Perspective, the weekly series that connects students with designers, manufacturers, educators, industry professionals, and design media celebrities to hear their stories on just how they've gotten to where they are now. Through our conversations, we connect the past, present, and future of design to show just how much we can learn from each other to grow towards our fullest potential without prescribed limitations. Think of A Student's Perspective as a weekly design lecture series from the student's point of view. A Student's Perspective is a division of the nonprofit University Hall of Innovation, whose goals are to connect students with the design industry through design challenges and mentorship, and a collaboration with the Marywood University Interior Architecture Program in Scranton, Pennsylvania. All interviews can be found in their video format at www.astudentsperspective.tv. For more information or sponsorship inquiries, please contact universityhallofinnovation@gmail.com. So hello, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of A Student's Perspective. We are here at the Leicester School of Architecture in the UK for the BIM in Leicester conference. And this is season 10 of A Student's Perspective. My name is Stephen.
I'm Misbah.
I'm Ferris.
And we are joined by Ferris. Ferris, would you introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your background and kind of where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me on. So my name is Ferris Yasser. I have a Bachelor of Science in Architectural Systems Engineering. So it's a 5-year degree where it encompasses architecture technology, but it's more comprehensive. So you get to study urban design, urban planning, interior design, landscape, mechanical stuff, construction structure. So you kind of have an all-round perspective, which really opened a lot of perspectives for me, made me see things a bit differently. I'll skip to where I am now and how I got there, but when I reached my final year of architecture, I was really into high-tech architecture and stuff that flies and is made of magnetic fields, and then now I teach sustainable architecture and how we can go back to the basics and build using straw and mud within a modern context in a way that doesn't do away with tradition or with culture and respects the status quo, the country we're building in, even the district we're building in, to understand that we're not designing in a vacuum and we're not designing for the people, we're designing with the people. It's a very big difference. So that's what happened then and now. In between them was, for my graduation project, I was very grateful to be first of my class, and one of the jurors told my supervisor that Ferris should apply for a scholarship at MIT because they're very interested in all this kind of high-tech stuff. And my graduation project had electrochromatic glass. At the time, it was still new. You could only hear about it in cars. I built a future proposition for how the building would have a structure that's completely magnetic, so no columns and no beams. And what happened was just one little mistake. My supervisor forgot to tell me, and we didn't keep contact afterwards. And somewhere along the line, I said, you know what, I'll go into sustainable building engineering because I want to know how can I bring in sustainability into these high-tech solutions. And when I did, I found that these high-tech solutions are, at best, an elitist project. At worst, it's a really good recipe for destruction because it doesn't really take into consideration the wider population. From there, I started teaching, and I started creating electives that just circumambulated around the idea of sustainable architecture and urban planning for informal settlements, for example. So I was working in Cairo at the time, and 70% of Cairo is made of informal settlements, or is comprised of informal settlements. So how can we refurbish these structures? How can we provide better insulation? How can we take them and simulate them and see them as something that is promising instead of the status quo of we have to demolish them because there's no other way to actually use these structures? And from simulating them, I started designing elements for them. How can we turn cores into wind catchers or solar chimneys? How can we provide the correct insulation for them? What materials do we have locally to build that insulation? And all of these propositions turned into research papers. I became a researcher. And then the electives focused on the same thing. And I had a bunch of students that were really interested on seeing how they can actually have I say concrete, and that's the irony here, but a mud, let's say, or a clay approach to design and to architecture. And then that got me interested in my PhD, which was focused on developing insulation in the UK for Grade 2 listed homes. So basically homes you cannot refurbish on the outside, made of agricultural waste, and how we can install that on the inside and not use too much real estate, so make it as slim as possible and perform as good as foam and make it compostable at the same time. So that was just a little bit of what I've been through, and because of that I found it very difficult to work in architectural firms. I worked in one firm for a year, and it was my professor and my mentor as well. His name is Ahmed Hamid, very known architect, that worked with the sustainability guru of the 20th century, Hassan Fathi, that very little people know of, which is a shame, because he coined the term carbon footprint in the 40s when no one heard of it in the first place. He came up with the idea of a life cycle analysis and a circular economy, and he designed for the people. And he had surveys to ask them, how many kids do you have? How many chickens do you have? How many cows do you have? What kind of plot do you want to live on? Where would you rather be, inside, outside? And he would design and build cities based on what people need, and not be in a plane and design Brasilia in 2 minutes on a sketch. And so when that shapes how you think, it's very hard to then work in firms that have the same idea. So I've taken that experience and that privilege that I've had, and I've tried to put it into academia, that maybe when we see future generations graduating, they have a glimpse of it, and then when they go on to their futures, they can also manifest that one way or the other in their own firms. So yeah.
That's quite a journey, and what I find really interesting is taking the same kind of approach that you would have taken to these futuristic or fantastical things, the same methodology of research and application of materials, but applying them on the entire opposite end of the spectrum of, okay, not just how can we build in the way that we built hundreds of years ago, but how can we update those in the best way using this technology, which is what I think probably far too many people avoid doing, because they just see, okay, I'm going to make the shiny thing, rather than take that energy and put it into making what is already here better.
Yes.
And I think that's amazing. I love that journey. Yeah.
I mean, I would say, as much as it's everyone always would love to take credit for what they do, but I think part of it is just, and this is something that we lack strongly in architecture, especially in architectural schools and how we teach architecture, is the semantics behind it. People always say, the famous saying that architects are the liberal artists of the sciences, which is true. Because when you're an architect, you're basically understanding how the human acts within a space, and then you're trying to create that space for them. You're just trying to help them. I've never seen anything in scholastic traditions or in divine traditions that give any premise or any value to high structures, to vertical structures. Fast forward now, the science is there. We don't do well in skyscrapers. We don't do well in anything that's 3 or 4 stories plus. We're not designed to be vertical. We're designed to be horizontal. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work on a social scale, on an economic scale, even on an environmental scale. Even from a construction point of view, the economics you have to put in, it just doesn't work. So understanding that, seeing it on the timeline of how the tradition it was, or how people used to do it in the olden days, as they say, and how science says now how things should be, it's very clear. When they said, I forgot, I think the architect was it Lewis, I think, he said, the death of modernity was in 1973 at 3 p.m., I believe, when they found out that planning for people and putting them in blocks does not work, and they had to demolish all of those blocks in New York, I think. So it's just understanding that, and understanding that when you build with the traditional material, it doesn't mean that it's any less than quote-unquote an advanced material. Just as an example, if you compare between mud brick and fire brick, the UK used to build houses with cob just up to 150 years ago, just before the Victorian age where we had Victorian homes. They were wonderful. They kept you warm in the winter and cool in the summer. They were cheap to make. Everyone knew how to make them. The maintenance was easy. Everyone could have a home very easily. Similarly, across countries and across the globe, we had mud brick everywhere. If you compare it to fire brick, for example, fire brick is just a mud brick or a clay brick that's been put in a kiln. Okay, a fire brick is technically, in chemical terms, it's a stone. It's not a brick anymore. It is literally a stone. If you look at it under the microscope, it looks like a stone. So what does it do? It doesn't insulate. It's a great conductor, especially when you put aluminum in it, which most brick companies do. It's a great conductor. Yes, it doesn't allow water in, so doesn't mud. But it doesn't allow water in if there's a flood. Okay. But what's the cost of that? High energy costs. Maintenance is too high. It's more expensive to make in the first place than having a mud brick. And the embedded carbon in a fire brick is so much higher than having a mud brick because you have to put it in a kiln. And so if you look at the structure, there isn't really a modern material. We just like to put certain labels on them and say a fire brick is a modern material. It's not. It's been there for more than 4,000 years. But it's just that the ancients were smarter than we were, and they knew that they shouldn't use it. Same with cement. What properties does it have? I can give you at least 5 different mortars. One of them is called hiba in Arabic, which is basically a mix of limestone and mud, or powdered limestone and mud and sand and other materials, which is completely water impermeable. It's breathable, and it lasts as good as cement does, and it's cheaper, and doesn't have a carbon emitted footprint. So it's just about understanding how the world works in historical context, cultural context, and then you can really start to see that what shines, as you said, is not always the right thing, and it does have, let's say, a luxurious factor to it. And luxury just comes from luxuria, which is to make someone envious of what you have. That's the root word in Latin. It's just to make someone say, you have something I don't, and I want that. The end purpose, if you look at it properly, you won't find it. Yeah.
So, you said you're teaching now.
Yeah.
How is this being accepted, or are the students responding to it, and are they taking it and pushing it along, or what's the response to something like this?
That's a great question, because obviously, when you push against the tide, there's always a lot of resistance. But I try not to push against the tide. I try to swim with the tide, but just take it in the right direction as much as I can, or go in the direction I want to go with the tide. So I teach my students how to use concrete, but I also show them the cons behind concrete and how concrete has its uses. I'm not trying to do away with concrete, but you have to put it in the right place. And how can concrete be better? I had an interview with a colleague of mine who all of his life is dedicated to making concrete more sustainable. From a life cycle analysis perspective, so from the point of extracting the raw materials from the ground to making it to disposing of it. That's his whole life's work. And if you take that and you put it into architecture, you will find a lot of promising solutions. So when I teach concrete, here's traditional concrete. Here's what concrete can be. Here's the status quo. Here's what you should do to make concrete more sustainable. Now, add to this, there are other materials which you haven't been taught, or I haven't been taught even at school, that I had to research after. And I had to attend workshops to learn about. And I had to go to conferences and speak to professionals that have been around for, decades working on this. Some of my mentors are 80 plus years old because they still carry the tradition, and they're in a modern sense, and they're modern. Again, we have to define the term, but anyway. So when you give that kind of context, that matrix, it becomes very acceptable because the students understand what's going on in the market, which is what every architecture school wants to do. But you also expand their horizons. But you're right. I mean, I've worked in departments where when I suggested that we speak to students about concrete and how it can be developed for a more sustainable future, the proposition was met with a lot of resistance and sometimes rejection, because to them they wanted to see a building that is built with that sustainable concrete in the UK, and it's been awarded a certain type of award. And anything that's out of the UK is not accepted, especially if it's in the Southern Hemisphere. And it fulfills those requirements, and it uses concrete, and it has a different type of award system. And I think that, I don't want to say a closed mindset or a narrow mindset, but I think that type of monograph way of thinking is that if it's not this way, it's the wrong way. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. Who said it's not broken? That's where the problem is. But in general, most schools are trying to push towards sustainability, and they're very welcome to different perspectives, as long as students have a very good matrix and understanding of the status quo and what can be. I think that's where you have to find the balance. Because there are a lot of advocates for doing away with what we have, and as much as it sounds lovely, but sometimes there's an element of, not that they are like this, but the proposition itself may be a bit ignorant to deal away with all what tech has reached, because we develop concrete for a reason. So yeah, I think that's how I try to approach it.
It just reminds me of the research that I was reading the other day about the Roman concrete, that they were, it's self-healing because of all the components that they were using.
Yes.
They were actually using lava and like limestones, which nowadays would be quite expensive to make, but in that time it was easier to make, and it lasted for ages. As you can see, Roman still.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just fascinating how old traditions were done in a way that looked at the environment and looked at the people and looked at the surrounding to have the minimal damage to the environment. But nowadays it's not really factored into the design, the damage that we're causing to the earth and all that we're doing by chopping trees and mining quarries. But back in the days, they would design in a way that it would help the earth heal, as well as people have a place which suits their environment, which suits them to live in. So it's quite fascinating. It's just reminded me of what you were saying, so that research that I've read a couple of days ago.
I'll pick up on that. You just said something very interesting, and you said that now it would be very expensive to make the same thing.
Yeah.
Rome, geographically, we are part of ancient Rome. And the reason it would be expensive is because the way the economic structure is set up, and the way we have certain type of lobbying, it makes it very easy for the right thing to be very hard. And that's just a structure thing. I was just giving a talk about life cycle analysis, or LCA, and how to develop the right life cycle analysis for products or for buildings. We have to have a holistic approach, and part of it is the architects having the right approach towards design, the customers wanting the right products, and the manufacturers feeling like they have to satisfy both the architects or the engineers and the laborers and the customers to provide the right products, or else they will not buy them. Just a simple example, if we were to use the local materials we have in the UK to build homes with, I promise you there would not be an energy crisis. There would not be an energy crisis. It's as simple as that. But we don't, and we use materials that are not made for the UK. To be frank, they're not made for anywhere, because Cairo is also made, 70% of it. I worked there as a researcher for 5 years. Cairo is also made of fire brick. And newsflash, it doesn't work either in the heat, and they have to use air conditioning. So we have to use heating here, they have to use air conditioning there. So it just doesn't work. If you take this soil, put it there, it won't work the same way. And if you take that soil, put it here, it won't work the same way. So every place is just made perfectly. But I think this, again, answers a very deep question, is that as architects, are we, or as humans even, do we have the right to use nature? Is nature, or is the environment, a tool that we are allowed to use? Or is it an element in itself that we are responsible of taking care of? As the highest species, in terms of thought, every species, there are things that are three-dimensional objects and they have a weight. A rock. Three-dimensional objects, they have a weight and they grow. Plants. Three-dimensional objects, they have a weight, they grow, and they feel. Animals. Three-dimensional objects, they have a weight, they grow, they feel, and they think, and they imagine. Humans. We're at the top of that chain. As humans, we're supposed to take care of the environment, take care of ourselves, and take care of the species that live in that environment. And so if you answer that question in, oh, I'm here to take care of the environment, not here to use it, you will make sure, just as you said, the exact term you said, to make the earth heal itself and to help build something that will heal itself and that will not cause any damage to the earth. But that is an existential mindset. And that is what we don't teach in architecture anymore. We teach grasshopper. We teach how to make a beautiful pavilion. We teach how to use 5-axis points robots, how to create a facade that's, brings in the light and the feelings of, manifestation and post-colonialism and all that stuff. But the student doesn't even know what post-colonialism is in its essence. Where does it stem from? Are all the arguments correct? They don't understand all this. And then the argument is made, we don't need this. This is semantics. We're an architecture school. We're not philosophy. That's exactly it. Architecture is philosophy. It's anthropology. It's sociology. It's environmental sciences. It's geography. It's history. It's all of those things. So understanding how to build comes from those very basic questions. But I think there is still a lot of hope. I think that a lot of architects, especially the youngsters or the young generation, and I see it in my workshops. I was just in Cairo in a workshop. I see the students, they can see past all of this. That little fad has gone now of having so many pavilions being done, building buildings and skyscrapers with grasshopper and showing that you can, stretch your muscles, and it's gone. They say when Facebook came out, the thinker and the follower became the same. I say when computational design came out, or when AI came out, the true designer and the fake became the same. Because now a computer can do everything you can do. So what are you going to do as an architect or as an engineer that will really show that you understand something the computer doesn't understand or the machine doesn't understand? So no, it's there, and they're starting to use the tools for the greater good. We used to have a dichotomy in my day. I'm not going to learn Grasshopper because it's the wrong thing to use. Or I'm not going to use SketchUp or whatever. I'm not going to use those heavily parametric-based modeling solutions because they're using the wrong way. I'm going to go with traditional methods. That's something I saw. Thank God I didn't go down that route, but I still did not use the tools the way I could have for architecture. But now they want to learn those tools because they understand it's a very strong tool to have, but they're using it in all the right ways. How can we use the plugins to test for thermal comfort, for load bearing, instead of how to make the building look like a ribbon? It's a very different approach.
Yeah. I think, so when you look at all of the facets of a project, when it goes from the public to the user to the architect to the engineer, is there one kind of point within there that maybe not causes the most problems, but that sort of drives the conversation in where we are now? Whereas is it the public is saying we want these crazy anamorphic kind of structures, or is it the designer saying we want to make these things and I want to show you what I can do and how my thing is different than the 15 million things that have come before me and the things that will come after me? Or is it the engineers who are trying to do certain things, or is it the critics who are only lauding the things that are different? Is there something in there that starts to tip the scales?
I think the answer is in your question, honestly. I think it's just the age of the eye. So the iPhone, the iPod, it's just the age of the eye. If we were to divide maybe more or less what happened throughout the past few centuries, we had the age of maybe divinity or dogma, depending on which side you're on, or which country you're looking at, or which region. And then we had the age of reason, Industrial Revolution. And now we have the age of feeling. So I'll take those and just put that each one as a spotlight on architecture. In the age of dogma or divinity, there was a certain way to design. It had to respect certain laws of nature. There was a hierarchy in structures. You could tell this structure is more power to the church or mosque or whatever it may be. There's a certain urban fabric that respects what people need, how people live, to bring out the best in them, to put their vices down, etc. There was a law. You cannot build a wall that will take away sun from your neighbor. If you're going to build a water well, you have to create small streams for the cats and dogs to drink from. It was an age of understanding that you're eternal, you're not mortal. That was a very different way of designing, but also came with negatives when things were warped. In the age of reason, we had function follows function. There was almost no form. If you're building a hospital, that's how you're going to divide it. Here's a corridor, you divide the rooms this way, you have only 2 or 3 modules for rooms you follow. Bauhausian design or Corbusian design, however you want to put it. Very functional. Everything, if it's not a right angle, it's a wrong angle. Everything was very industrial. And now I think we're just in the age of feeling. I feel like building a building that looks like a seashell, and then the inside looks like a croissant if you cut it in half. So I'll do that because I can. Mm-hmm. And the client says, I want a building that looks like a fruit roll-up. But it's so dark, it manifests venom in it. Okay, I can do that too. So everyone wants something, and everyone can do something. Mm-hmm. And then when the critic critiques, he also critiques based on what does he want. He has a vision of what should, postmodern architecture be. And I don't dare to say that I have a vision for what, architectural style should be, because I am caught up in, I'm learning myself and I'm trying to develop an understanding. But I really do understand that architecture should serve people, species, and the environment in the best way possible. It should respect tradition, culture, nature, belief, customs, everything all together. When I teach visualization or 3D visualization, when I use a rendering example or a model for an example, I'll say, I always give this example to my students because I want them to see the difference. This is how I designed a sustainable beach house in Cairo. And this is how I designed a sustainable beach house in the UK. They're very different materials, dimensions, heights, styles, because that is the reality of something. Cutting off from history is like cutting someone's head off of their body. You cannot. It just doesn't work like that. So I think it's just that. It's just that everyone is concerned with their own selves. There's a beautiful proverb by a wise man. It says, if you reach an age where everyone is extremely stringent, they don't want to help others with their time or their money, and you find everyone following their own desires and their own wishes and wants, then wait for the last hour. That's it. So I think we're at that stage sometimes. It's just about me, my view, my opinion. There's no collective, and that's what about me. I always try to say, what I try to do in my work or my research or my teaching is community design, collaborative design, comprehensive design, the 3 C's. You need to have all 3. If one of them is missing, then there's a really weak link. Yeah.
It's very fascinating to me that your study started as something high-tech and electromagnetics, and you're speaking so much about sustainability and you're so passionate about that. Just want to know, how did that transition happen and what led to that transition?
I mean, I would say a few things. First of all, it's just complete divine decree that you find a path and you say, it seems like a good one. It doesn't look evil. It doesn't seem like there's something bad about it. Why not try it? The path untreaded. Maybe it's something good there. But I think the more I started to learn more about just the semantics of things, and I had really good teachers. That's why I love to teach, because I try to be an emulation of those beautiful, wonderful teachers I had that made me see things in such a different light. So when I have a course to teach, I remember history and theories course. I remember my teacher and how he made me love history and theories, not see it as history and theories, but see it as life. It's a life course, but it's just named history and theories in architecture. Okay. So I think it's just a combination of, divine decree, great teachers, and just curiosity. Some people are really afraid to ask, what if? And they always say thinking is the blessing of going through a whole process without having to face neither the positives or the negatives. Some people are afraid to think. If you just think and say, what if I don't work for this office that makes these beautiful glass structures and I work for somewhere else where I find more meaning? What if I design a great school in a developing country somewhere and I put smiles on people's faces every day, just like Anna Heringer does in Bangladesh and in Africa, etc. And we could say, she could have worked in any office. She could have had a super architect office. And she doesn't make much, but she's very happy with her life. And that's quality life. Because you don't need much to be happy, but you need to give a lot to be happy. Again, research shows that. It's not semantics. Now this is proven through ECGs and brain scans. The more you give, the more you're happy, not the more you make. So I think it's just asking and saying, what if? And trying. And going through that process. And finding a tribe that actually helps you. I always say everyone needs to read Atomic Habits and The Infinite Game. Atomic Habits by James Clear, Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. You have to read those two books. Because if you want to build that habit of going down the right route and trying something new, you need to know how to have it. And part of it is for having the right group. I stayed away from architects that would always shun me for doing what I'm doing. And I stayed with groups that helped me develop my ideas and to correct my mistakes. And the Infinite Game, one of the Infinite Game principles is 5 principles. One of them is having existential flexibility and a just cause. You have to go with the flow. Sometimes you won't find a job there. You have to work in academia. Sometimes in academia, it'll be difficult. You have to work as an architect and as an academic at the same time. Sometimes you'll get bored with both. You have to start doing your own research to know what are the extents of your beliefs or your research or what you're proposing. And I was very grateful to work in both, practice, academia, and research. I don't know if that answers the question, but to me, you just need to think and say, what if? And have a good intention, a pure intention, not one that wants money, or to be famous, or to have your name somewhere. Just move on and do the right thing. I think that's the right place to start.
Yeah, and I think where you are in teaching your students the way that you are, you're preparing for the 20, 30, 40 years from now, and the sort of growth and expansion of you teach one and they teach two and they teach two and keep on going from there. And I think that's, I mean, just hearing you talk about teaching, I feel very, very similar to that. And I just, again, I think just that the way that you're approaching it, I think is really, it's very beautiful to me. Thank you. And I'm so glad that we got the chance to sit down now.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing sort of what happens in the future. I think it does bring us to sort of the end of our time, but one of the questions that we always ask, and I think you've probably touched on it several different ways, but is if you were to go back to your student self, knowing everything you know now, what sort of advice might you have for that person?
I'll say in a more one is practical and the other is very spiritual. The practical one is you need to use all the tools at your disposal to reach not success but reach effective implementation of what you're doing in the environment. Success to people means different things. It could mean more money, it could mean more views, it could mean more citations for publication, each to their own. To me, success is what is the probability of your work being passed on and it changing people's lives, or at least what they're trying to fight for. A lot of people fight for great causes. It never surfaces, but we all know it's a great cause. It might come to fruition after 100, 200 years. It might never come at all. Again, their cause will stand the test of time. My question is, what are you doing to implement? If you need to network. Don't be shy. Step out of your comfort zone. If you need to be alone sometimes to have more me time to work and to think and to reflect on your work, have more of an introvert time or introvert personality when you need to have it. If you need to use advanced tools, don't let someone have, they always say pieces, knowing the other enemy has the bigger stick. If someone has Grasshopper and Rivet and all of these parametric tools, and you're working with a pencil and compass, all my respect to the pencil and compass, but use the tools and use them in a correct way. Redefine what they're used for. So use everything you can to see that change come to life in a pure sense. Again, not in an egocentric sense. That's the practical one. The spiritual one, I would say, everything comes at the right time. Everything is written, everything falls, it depends on your belief system. I believe everything is written correctly. You have a role to play, but it's like a tree diagram. If you do, if you don't, what will happen here, and then you get to choose what goes on next. I once complained to my mentor. I told him, I can't find the right PhD, the right place to go, the right supervisor. It's been 3 years now. It's taking me so much time. I send an email. They respond after so much time. They waste so much of your time. He said, Faris, the world orbits much slower than how you think. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. You do what you have to do. Everything will come at the right time. The connections will come when it's needed. Your work will surface when it's needed. Just do what you have to do. You're not responsible for the results. You're not responsible for what happens to you. You're responsible for what you do. Just do it and be grateful and glad with where you are, as long as you have the right intention. You're on the right track. That's all I can say.
That's powerful. I want to say thank you for spending time with us today. I'm glad that we were able to do this. If any of you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to like, comment, and follow, and make sure to turn in next week as the conversation continues from a student's perspective. We hope you liked this discussion with the design industry from a student's perspective. Please like, share, and comment, and stay tuned for more inspiring conversations to come.